Hari Om. In the C Sharp and .NET course, we are currently discussing the web-based application development on .NET. We have already covered the fundamentals of web form in our previous video. We have also discussed the two important web form events. You call it as post-back event and non-post-back event. These two events we have already discussed in our previous video. We are going to continue the discussion of web form events in this video. And we will also talk about the life cycle of a web form. We have seen the www architecture is a client server architecture, and what are the different web technologies used on the client side and what are the web technologies used on the server side also we discussed. We have also seen ASP.NET is a platform for developing and running web applications on a web server. And if you want to run a ASP.NET web application, if your machine is a Windows operating system, you must have Internet Information Service running in your Windows machine. This is the architecture which we discussed in our previous video. We have also seen a web application is a client server application that lives on a web server, and the client is the user's machine with an internet browser, whereas the web server is a machine that stores the web documents, all the web pages that includes the static pages as well as dynamic pages. Apart from that, all the server scripts will also be included in the web documents. The web forms helps you in developing the web application in a rapid manner. So it brings rapid application development. Web form is created for an application which is deployed to a web server, and the user will be interacting with the application through a standard browser that opens the web form. The web forms are one of the programming models for creating ASP.NET websites and web applications. The web form is the oldest ASP.NET programming model with event-driven web pages. This is the point we have to note here. All the web forms are event-driven web pages. When I say event-driven, the web page contains lots of user controls, and each user control can trigger a particular event, and for each event you can have event handlers defined in the server. So I can say the web forms is a event-driven web pages written as a combination of HTML. Obviously your web pages will be having HTML for the presentation, and it will have lots of server controls which are nothing but your user controls. And for each user control, when you want to trigger an event, you will have a event handler which you call as the server code. With the web forms, you can create an ASPX page consisting of HTML and web controls and also the C# code. We know that the web forms are compiled and executed on the server, which will generate the HTML that displays on the web page. That is displayed as the web page, I should say. The web forms come with hundreds of different web controls and web components to build user-driven websites with data access. So these are some of the basics we have already come across. Now under the web form events, we have seen what do you mean by a round trip, because whenever there is a user interaction with the web form, the user will be triggering an event. Whenever he triggers the event, the user interaction requires a round trip because the events are happening on the client machine, whereas all the event handlers are available in the server. So what the browser will do, the browser will send a message to the server. The browser is nothing but the client application. So the client machine which has the browser will send a message to the server, and the server will be responding with the event handler. This is what happens in the round trip. We have already discussed what is a round trip with a particular example and how it gets executed, under which we have seen two different important events of a web form, which you call as postback event, and the other one is non-postback event. So in the postback event, we have seen whichever event is immediately posted to the server for processing. Whichever event is immediately posted to the server for processing is what you call as the postback event, and the example we have seen as the button click event. Whereas the non-postback events are the events which can be delayed for a considerable time, and we have seen an example of text box change event which comes under the non-postback event. And if you want to make the non-postback event to be the postback event, that is also possible using a property called as auto postback property. Now the question is how the web pages are maintaining the values that are given for each and every user controls, which you call as the view state. See, most of the time the controls in user interfaces have to remember their state when reloaded again, because in the round trip what happens, whenever you are going to post your value, so this is the client browser, you enter the value of number 1 and you enter the value of number 2 and you click the add button. When you click the add button, what happens? The request is going to the server. The request goes to the server. Puju, the request goes to the server and the server will be handling. What do you mean by handling here? The two values will be added. So this is the event which will be triggered when the button click is activated. So once the event handler is executed, what the system has to do, it has to post the values in the web page. When it is posting the values, remember, apart from assigning value 11 to this text box, value 5 and 6 should also be assigned in these text boxes, because this is the web page which will be created as a new web page. Remember, this page will be posted here, and when it is responding, when the server is responding, this HTML page will be created. This HTML page will be created right from the scratch. So when I say it will be created right from the scratch, the labels will be created, text boxes will be created, the button will be created, and the result box will also be created. So by the time when it is creating, it needs to remember the values 5 and 6 for these two text boxes, because this is the new value which you are going to calculate, and this value will be calculated in the event handler. By the time, the values of 5 and 6 should also be remembered by the system, for which it is using the view state. So most of the time the controls in the user interfaces have to remember their state when reloaded again. For example, text boxes may lose their content, or list boxes forget which item was selected. So the web forms are running in a stateless event. This is the reason why the system has to remember the states of each and every user control. So what happens? Every submission to the server loses the state from previous post unless the developer configured to preserve the session knowledge. So ASP.NET provides a support for maintaining some of the state automatically. So this is what I have shown you now as an example of remembering the values 5 and 6 also in these two text boxes, apart from calculating the new value. So the new value can be added, not only the new value, but the previous values which are given to the server should also be remembered, which is done generally by the view state. So therefore, whenever a web form is posted to the server recreates it from the scratch before it is returned to the client. The ASP.NET provides a mechanism that automatically maintains states for server controls, which you call as the view state. So in general, I can say view state is the method to preserve the value of the web page and controls between round trips. So when the client request is taken to the server and the response is created and posted back to the client, you call it as round trip. So during this process, you have to preserve the values available on the web page or the values that are available on the user controls, for which you use the method which you call as the view state. So you can say view state is a page level state management technique. Please underline, it can be called as a page level state management technique. Therefore, if a selection is made in a list box, that selection is preserved after the page is posted back to the server and recreated on the client. So the view state is actually coming under a technique called a state management in ASP.NET, because HTTP is the protocol which we use for the client server architecture, and this protocol is a stateless protocol. So since it is a stateless protocol, what you have to do, you need a management technique which is used for preserving the state of your user control or a web page or an object in a web form. So we can say state management is a mechanism to preserve states between subsequent client request and the server response. So when you take the state management techniques for the client side management, you can use view state, control state, hidden fields, cookies or query string. Query string, I think all of you may remember in our web form demo, we have seen how the query string can be used to access the values from one web page to another web page. Or I can put it this way, the query strings are used for transferring data from one web page to another web page. This we have already seen in our demo program. Apart from that, view state can also be used for the client side state management. And for the server side state management, I can use cache or application state, session states. Session state is one of the important concepts that is coming under web forms, which is used for the server side state management. So that's it about the web form events. The two major events are called as postback and non-postback events. And for managing the postback and non-postback events, the web forms use a method called as view state, which will be remembering the previous state when the server recreates the web pages. The previous state will be remembered using the view state mechanism, where thereby the server can recreate the web pages right from the scratch by including all the previous state information. We will be discussing the web form life cycle in our next video. Thank you.